what do you think Nike, Nestle, and Marriott, these global giants, what do they all have in common? Well, they crack the code on building brand value across borders. And Nataly Kelly, who is the former VP at HubSpot, and now she's the CMO at Zappi, she shares insights in her new book called Brand Global Adapt Local. And it reveals how top brands stay culturally relevant without losing their soul. We're here on the Marketer of the Day podcast. I'm Robert Plank. We're powered by dfypodcast.com. We remove barriers so you can focus on real conversations. And the real conversation that we're having with Nataly today is how she's lived and worked across cultures. She's seen things that work, but don't work. Sometimes it works here and it doesn't translate over there. So she's had these global adventures and lived to tell about it, written some books, done some amazing things. So we'll hear some amazing stories. So Nataly, glad to be speaking with you.
Thank you so much for having me, Robert.
You're very welcome. And so what did we leave out of that bio? What currently has you just so excited, energized, passionate?
Oh, I mean, I love building teams. My number one thing that keeps me passionate about my job is the people I work with. Building global teams is a big part of building a global brand. So I think, hiring, all of those things around hiring great people and building a team is really the secret to success in any business, but especially global business.
I like it. And it's reassuring, right? That the people will figure it out. Just make sure that they work together. But we've pretty much every adult has been in many situations where the team doesn't work out or the boss doesn't care or there's that one toxic person or just who knows what. And so what's your approach to this? You say, okay, we've got this problem. We've got this budget. We need these people. How do you even begin to solve such a huge problem like that?
Yeah, I mean, it's all about prioritization, I think, at the end of the day, and really having clarity on the goals. Whenever things get tough, no matter if it's a people problem or a budget problem, it always helps to zoom out and look at, okay, but where are we headed and what's the most important thing that we need to do? And a lot of times when you do that, everything else can just fade away and get everybody really clearly focused on the things that matter the most. I'm a big believer in the 80% solution and
Sure.
like finding out what is that small thing that really makes the 80% solves 80% of the problem or gets you 80% of the way there. So I think a lot of the rest is noise, and zeroing in on that can help diffuse all those other things that show up as problems in our daily lives.
Oh yeah. And you even think about just life in general, right? You think about 5, 10 years ago and the situation that you look back on, you're like, man, the things I was worried about, concerned about, thinking about, focused on, none of that really mattered in hindsight. And it's hard to dig yourself out of that present moment and just be like, hey, we've got to zoom out and look at that bigger picture. And I used to not take it seriously, right? When I was a young buck, I just would like charge ahead, like, oh, I don't only have so much time I have to do this, but that I think as I've gotten wiser and older, I've embraced the tedium, right? The monotony. And I've said, hey, whatever size of a project goal, I'll write it down. I'll work on it. I'll write it down again. I'll talk to someone about it. I'll diagram it. I'll flow chart it. And it's like, it seems like again, in the moment, it feels like you're moving so slow, right? So tedious, but then that's how things actually get done, right? Because you stay on target, and it gets all the stuff in your subconscious. So, do you feel similarly when you're talking about like writing goals and kind of like being careful? It's like it's important, even though it's easy to not take seriously, isn't it?
Yeah. It's so interesting. I write a lot in my newsletter about setting goals and staying accountable and having like an operating system for keeping yourself on track. And one of the things that I find is a lot of the reasons that goals fail is because they're not clear enough, but also they're not backed by an action plan. And also, if they are backed by an action plan, it's too stringent to be realistic. So take any goal that you want to achieve or that people set as a New Year's resolution. They often have very unrealistic timeframes as to when that's going to be achieved. And they'll say, oh, like, going to lose weight. I'll lose 2 pounds a week for the whole year. It's like unrealistic. And, it's so having a realistic adjustment of the goal in real time is important because things change. And I think that's where a lot of goal setting falls down is like, maybe what we thought we wanted isn't what we wanted now that we're 6 months into, the year. Or, that's the type of adaptive, goal adjustment that I think is important. It's not just adapting. I mean, I think it's okay to adapt the goal. I totally think that's okay. And people are often surprised by that because they'll say, like, how did you accomplish this? Or how are you, achieving these things that you set out to do? Well, it's because I'm flexible. I don't always get to achieve what I want, but I do adjust things along the way to something that may be more realistic than what I originally thought I would achieve. So I don't know if that makes sense to you, Robert, but
It does, and it opens up new ideas and questions because it makes you wonder, like, do you sometimes psych yourself out with the goal readjusting? Do you say, well, I wanted to do all these things, and then 6 weeks later we readjusted? Does it feel like you're maybe like selling yourself short, or like by being flexible, adaptable, it's like doesn't it maybe sometimes feel like you're like setting the bar lower and lower, if that makes sense?
I think it's okay to set the bar a little lower as long as the focus is on progress. I can think of a couple goals I set last year where I had this idea that I would grow my newsletter following to, a much larger amount than was really realistic. But I had other goals that were maybe competing for my time and attention that I decided were actually more important than that. And so I adjusted the goal throughout the year and I hit my second goal. But what that tells me is my first one was just maybe not grounded in reality. And maybe I didn't set a good goal to begin with. So I think what happens a lot is people set a goal, then they give up because they are not on progress to hit it. But it's okay to readjust the goal once you have new information. I think that's part of adapting, And so I think it's totally fine. And I think people shouldn't view that as a failure. I think they should view it as, hey, I'm still better than where I was. I'm still making progress, because the idea is, let's make incremental improvement happen. Let's make incremental progress. It doesn't matter if we swing really big. And like a lot of us who have big dreams, we do tend to set like audacious goals. But the problem is when you just give up on them entirely and you don't say, you know what, let me readjust. I'm still going to make traction here, but maybe it won't be as crazy of a moonshot as I thought it was going to be.
Right. Yeah, and
Mhm.
that does make sense. So you're saying that it's you're not just readjusting the goal because you're getting lazy or tired. You have new information, and it's in the spirit of positivity and saying it's still an improvement, and I still have momentum, but it's just to keep me from completely giving up on the goal. Because then at that point, if you're not taking it seriously, and then the next goal you set, I won't take that seriously. It's a downward spiral, right? It's really scary. It's a slippery slope. And then you're like those people that have the New Year's resolutions that you're saying, and they just keep doing it every year. And after a few years of that, like it's really not taken seriously. And so, as far as helping us wrap our head around the concreteness of it, like have you accomplished? What do you have to maybe humble brag about?
Well, I mean, we just published a book, myself and my co-author Catherine Melchiorre, and that was one of my goals for this year. So I'm happy that we got that out. And that is a book about branding globally. It's called Brand Global, Adapt Local, and it just was launched in June. So very exciting. We just did a book tour, and we were in France at the Cannes Lions Festival, launching it there, and we were also in New York last week, launching it there. So that I think is an example of a success. There's other things though that are more quantifiable. Like, did you launch a book? Yes or no? And that's going to happen no matter what, because the publisher has to get it out on time. But like, I'll give you an example of one where I feel like I've adjusted. So, like my newsletter, I write a LinkedIn newsletter, and my goal is to get one out every week. You could say, okay, my goal is to write a weekly newsletter. Maybe a better goal would have been to say, I hope to publish 50 editions of that newsletter next year. That way it gives me 2 weeks off, out of
Sure.
52. But, so I might not have hit the goal exactly the way that I thought I would, but it's okay because maybe next year I do 54 and I do two in a couple of weeks or something, where on like if I look over the years, I probably actually hit my original goal. I might not just have done it the way I thought I would. So that's kind of an example. Related to book publishing, this is my fourth book, and it's the first one where I'm not the lead author. And that was the question for me. Like, do I want to do a book where I'm not the lead author? Because I'm a writer and I've done this a while and I like to have control over what I write. But it's actually been a tremendous experience because the lead author, Catherine Melchiorre, is a veteran CMO. She's former global CMO of Shiseido. She's worked at Nike, at Hyatt, at Hannah Anderson, like a bunch of different large consumer brands. And I've learned so much from her that it's been an actual delight and a joy. And frankly, when you're not the lead author, it's a little bit less stress too. So it means that I have room for all the other things that I'm doing in my life.
Very cool. So you have a different experience. And so as far as writing a book, it's one of those things where like on the surface, it sounds hard and scary and boring, but then when someone jumps into their process, it gets interesting, right? When people talk about like, oh, I go through these iterations outlining it and like I rearrange stuff and then we get the words out and we refine it. And so like what after 4 books, what have you learned? Like what's your process, right? Or like what do you think you do that gives you a book that's complete and amazing and helpful versus, I mean, who knows how many people have half finished Word documents out there? What's your secret?
Yeah. Well, I always start with an outline and a timeline, and when I'm working with a publisher, knowing that I have deadlines to hit, I work backward from there and I create a plan and I stick to it. Now, fortunately, I have a lot of experience with writing. I was chief research officer at a company where we sold a lot of reports. And so we had to do a lot of writing at scale. So I have a lot of familiarity with that. But I often say to friends of mine who ask about writing a book, but they're not writers and they have ideas to share, but they don't like to write. They don't like the writing process. I often say, start with questions that you want to answer for your readers and interview yourself, record yourself, get a transcript, and then you've got AI tools now who can help you turn that into prose and create different chapters. And you have a writing partner in, ChatGPT or Claude or whatever tool you want to use. So I think it's now easier than it's ever been in my lifetime for people to share their ideas in writing in the format of a book. Because when you think about writing a book, it can seem daunting to people who don't normally write, because they're like, that many words, that many pages. And it almost feels like a homework assignment, can feel very boring, like you said, Robert. But I think when you think about like, oh, if I could talk to people, what would I say? If I could answer key questions, what would those be? How would I structure that information? Almost like you're structuring a conversation with friends or colleagues you want to help, becomes a lot easier to do it that way. So I often help people figure that out with a little bit of a structure, because a lot of people out there have lots of great information in their heads that needs to find its way to more people, which is the beauty of a book.
Yes. And
Mhm.
it's duplicatable, replicatable, and it opens a lot of doors. And so I love your kind of organizational mindset throughout this whole conversation, right? It's like sometimes people might say, well, I want to write a weekly newsletter. And you say, well, hey, 50 newsletters next year, like something more tangible, more doable. People say, I want to write a book. And they might just start with the page one and it's all meandering. And you're like, no, 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 start with the questions that you want your people to ask of you. And then that ends up kind of limiting the scope. You know when it's done, you know when it's long enough, you know what order to go into. And it's about the people, right? It's not just pontificating about concepts and ideas. You're like, hey, where are these people hurt? And what kind of problems does this book help solve? And so, speaking to that, this amazing sounding book, Brand Global, Adapt Local, who is it for? And if someone says, oh my gosh, I've got this huge problem in my business, my organization. This book is perfect for solving that. What would that be? Where is someone stuck where your book would really help?
Yeah. So it is for anyone working in an international business or who wants to take a brand global, and across different markets. And it's also for people who might be curious, like internationally curious,
Okay.
who might want to, think about what does it take to expand a brand into new markets. A lot of the stories in there are from people who've worked at these companies. So it's not just Catherine's stories from the brands she's worked at. It's not just mine and the companies I've worked with over the years, but it's people that we interviewed and connected with, and we're telling their stories too. So it's really behind the scenes look at what it takes to go global and some of the enlightening experiences that companies encounter along the way. Because, when you go into another country or, anytime you're having a new experience, your mind is opened up to the things you didn't know before. What's interesting is a lot of times businesses think, oh, we've got a product to sell. Humans need it here, humans need it there. It's the same thing. It's actually not the same thing in every country because laws are different, currencies are different, economies are different, people are different, the cultures, the beliefs that they have are different, and the way they work with each other is different. And the competitors are different. Like, there's a lot actually that's different. And so, really, what this book talks about is figuring out where do we flex and where do we stay consistent. We have this notion called freedom within a frame, and the idea is you have freedom to do things with your brand that you can flex in other markets and other cultures, but you always want to be consistent and define what your frame actually is. So for some companies, that's their logo is not going to change. Certain aspects of their product won't change in different markets. But then there's got to be some flexibility and some freedom to adapt as well.
Well, very cool. And do you have a good example of that? Because like it's a fascinating concept, and again, I keep drawing connections to what we've been talking about so far, the structured creativity, so to speak. You say, well, hey, here's the frame, and here's what won't change, but then you have the freedom to kind of play around and do things differently. And so, as far as all of these countries, cultures, areas that you visited, lived in, like, do you have a good example of where we can maybe flex in some interesting ways?
Yeah. So, one example that's kind of a fun one that we talk about in the book is Kit Kat. So, Kit Kat is pretty well known for its product. And everybody knows that a Kit Kat has, the four fingers and there's a wafer crunch and you can tear it apart. And, it has that familiarity from a product perspective. And we envision kind of the red wrapper and the logo, and we know what a Kit Kat is. Globally, everybody knows those things. What's interesting is in Japan, there are all these different flavors, and you can even collect the different flavors. There's like green tea matcha Kit Kat, there's like sakura cherry blossom Kit Kat. There's all these unique flavors that are kind of like collectible seasonal flavors that they bring out. And what's cool about Kit Kat is it goes around the world and adapts is their frame is basically, okay, we've got the four fingers every time, we've got wafer and chocolate, we've got the red logo, but what we're going to adapt is the flavor of the chocolate and the name of the product because maybe the flavor evokes like cherry blossom season or something else. And another company that does that really well is Starbucks. They'll have local products in each market that are adapted for that market. You can get flavors of tropical fruits in Brazil that you just can't get anywhere else because they have suppliers in that market where they can do those things. So it's very interesting. A lot of the consumer brands and food and beverage specifically are very good at this because taste, as we all know, is highly local. Some spices, some flavors in different countries are just more popular than they are here in the United
Right.
States. Peanut butter and jelly. When I was at HubSpot, we had a blog post called Sales and Marketing Go Together Like Peanut Butter and Jelly. And when it came time to localize that for French, I was interviewing French localization specialists. And I gave them the creative task of what are you going to do to adapt this? And a lot of them just translated peanut butter and jelly, but that's not something the French really care about. So the one who I ended up hiring had localized and adapted it to say sales and marketing go together like pain au chocolat, like a chocolate croissant, like the bread and the chocolate, like, and that really works well in that language and for that market. Whereas just simply keeping it consistent with peanut butter and jelly is not going to work in most markets outside of the US. The PB&J is a very American thing.
Right.
Yeah.
Well, that's cool to think about, the adapting to the different countries, different cultures, and having fun with it, and using it as a way to stand out and be unique. And so, this is a fascinating concept, and we could definitely use this extra just attention on our problems. And then there's also like just throughout our conversation, there's always the AI opportunities, right? Like how do we translate this into that? Use AI as the tool. AI is great at translating, and similar where you're talking about when you write a book and you have your kind of raw ideas, use AI to enhance it. And it's so important to consider the people, to rise above the AI, and also just to keep some of these things in mind. And it's like you've been on this fascinating journey, written an amazing book, and you have a lot of interesting, fun things to tell us. And so we've been jumping around, right, talking about all these different ideas, but I've only just met you. So it's important to me that we focus on what excites you. So in this conversation that Nataly Kelly and Robert Plank are having here right now today, Is there a missing hidden question that I should be asking you? I just don't know to ask you?
I think a lot about um, this topic of personal branding, especially because so many of my friends have been laid off. And, I work in tech and there were big tech layoffs. So hundreds of people being laid off by big tech companies and smaller ones too, laying off dozens at a time. And, this issue of people losing their jobs really requires them to take a step back and try to think about, like, what am I here for? What is my purpose? I suddenly had my identity wiped out overnight by being laid off by this large company that I thought was my family, my work family that I cared about, the culture, the people. And now I'm on my own. And that's like an eye opening thing for a lot of people, especially younger people who might not have experienced economic recessions and layoffs before. Like, I'm old enough that I've been through quite a few and I know kind of the drill, and you get back up on your feet and you start over and you find something new. And it's actually often an opportunity for folks to pivot, reposition themselves, find where they want to work. But that's top of mind for me every day because I have so many friends who've been through difficult transitions. And it's hard. There's a lot of soul searching going on right now. And with AI that you just talked about, Robert, people are asking, like, is this aspect of my job going to go away? And some companies are actually actively getting rid of employees and saying that they're going to replace them with AI. So that's the topic that's top of mind for me right now, that I think about a lot, because I think about, okay, how do I make sure that my team members have the skills that they'll need going into the future so that they're, future proofed in their skill development, but also, how do I make sure that I support all my colleagues who've lost their jobs and are struggling with their identity? Because I know a lot of people who were at companies for 5 years or more. Once you're there for so long, it becomes hard to separate your work identity from, who you are, and like associate with one company. So that's something. I know you have a lot of entrepreneurs who listen to your podcast, and you have a diverse group of listeners, but I think, that gives people the opportunity to think about, like, maybe I should have a side hustle. Maybe I should be an entrepreneur. Maybe I should do something for myself. So I like the fact that sometimes these hard moments are helping people open their eyes and maybe future proof themselves a little better. And that's very top of mind for me with everything happening in the world right now and with the economy, with technology. So
Right.
that's kind of my missing question.
And that might be book number 5 someday, right? The personal branding to adapt in the ever changing AI world and turn a bad into a good and say, well, okay, well, I was with this company for all these years and the identity became embedded in me and I just got kicked out from under me overnight. So what do I do with it? Well, hey, maybe this is the kickstart to now become an entrepreneur and to get my LinkedIn and my marketing and my own book and my own website and my own traffic and my own 54 newsletters in 1 year dialed in and all those things that you see someone like you do. You're like, well, how did she do it all? Well, you didn't just dump it in overnight, right? You eased into those habits and goals. And we can definitely learn a lot from you by checking out these resources such as Brand Global Adapt Local, How to Build Brand Value Across Cultures by Catherine Melchior Ray with Nataly Kelly. And that's all about how building global brands provides companies with access to new markets, new opportunities, and new ideas that can stimulate innovation and diversify revenue streams. But with these new opportunities comes additional challenges that marketers need to navigate in order to build an international brand. So this book will help you do that. It covers how to apply cultural understanding to interpreting data, and so much more. It's what you need to know about scaling a brand globally, and it's packed full of powerful insight from leading marketers. We also have a website, born2beglobal.com, and it's all about Nataly Kelly. She helps companies unlock global growth. And if you are a social media person, which you should be, right? Especially if you're taking this personal brand thing seriously and networking and all of that, go to on LinkedIn. That's linkedin.com/in/Nataly Kelly. That's Nataly is that first name. She is the CMO at Zappi.io. And before we go, can you tell us a quick spiel about Zappi? Because I see it, but I'm not sure I can explain it properly.
No problem. So Zappi is a consumer insights platform. So many B2C brands, especially global brands, need to do consumer research to understand what products they should launch, how they should launch them. Is their advertising going to resonate and hit the right note with consumers? All of that type of research. And how is their brand performing with consumers? So our platform allows companies, especially those large enterprise B2C brands, to really understand what consumers are thinking in a more continuous and connected fashion than ever before. It's a technology platform. Consider it your system of record for consumer research, kind of like a CRM is, but where you store all your consumer research for those types of applications.
Very cool. So if that is a thing you need a place to store that consumer research, that is zappi.io. They are the consumer insights platform that helps brands win. It's software that combines the power of consumer data and AI to deliver connected insights to create successful products, develop better ads, and build winning brands. That's zappi.io. And we've been speaking with Nataly Kelly, CMO at Zappi, Harvard Business Review contributor, born2beglobal.com. But where we really want you to go is check out that book, Brand Global, Adapt Local, How to Build Brand Value Across Cultures. And thanks, Nataly, for showing up and giving us just all these insights about goal setting, dealing with people, dealing with the culture, so much more. But before I let you go, it's time for the scary part of the show where I try to stump you. I try to put you on the spot by asking about a fun quote or lesson that has served you. So, what comes to mind for a fun quote or lesson?
So I'm not sure how fun this is, but my dad used to always say the best way out is through. And what that means is essentially no matter what it is, it's easier to focus on just getting through it than to bemoan it and complain about it, and try to find a way to avoid it. So that's one of those lessons that I always come back to, especially during hard times. The best way out is through.
If you're going through hell, keep going, they say, don't they?
Yeah, that's right.
Very nice. Well, Nataly Kelly, Brand Global Adapt Logo. Check it out on Amazon. And thanks for showing up and giving us so many amazing stories and insights. I appreciate what you had to say and what you did. So thank you.
Thank you, Robert. Pleasure to be here with you.